The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
I gotta say, folks, I am actually pretty excited to have a Fantasy NBA evening to recap that was not overwhelming in its girth of basketball games. We've had so many big ones these days. We had the big weekend recap, the reverse chronological lightning round that included a 12-game Saturday. We have an 11-game Monday, and then thankfully, a deep breath, a breather, 3-game Tuesday. There's really only two things that we were keeping an eye on that Tuesday card. Orlando was nothing. Boston was nothing. OKC and Denver were basically nothing. It was New York and Toronto. It was the only stuff that we had going on. So this is going to make today's show easier, which I'm pretty excited about. Here's what we got coming up on Fantasy NBA Today. By the way, hello, everyone. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. That's the name of the podcast. I'm your host, Dan Besbris. We'll have the great, the mighty, the marvelous Mike Apotria coming up in a few minutes. We'll talk DFS. We got our Hoopball DFS contest over at DraftKings today. That's coming up. We'll spend some time, obviously, talking about the two teams that I just mentioned from Tuesday's card that we were interested in, if there was any sort of measure of consistency. And then we got another 11-game NBA slate on the docket. It's a big Wednesday, which should make for a very interesting DFS card with late scratches in abundance these days. I'm sure we'll have some, what do they call it? They call them chalk guys. See if I can get my terminology right, but Mike will clue us in on that as well. I'd love to pick Mike's brain a tiny bit. And we did this on Thursday of last week as well. Season-long stuff, too. I want to get his takes on a few of these big-time center pickups that I've been discussing on the podcast over the last couple of days. Dwight Powell, Kenneth Faried, Robin Lopez, Cody Zeller, some of the centers that have fallen off a cliff like a Jahlil Okafor. Maxi Kleba's disappeared. All these guys. This is such a weird, unique, and interesting time for centers all of a sudden. Go figure. Anyway, we'll figure all that out in due time. That's coming up on today's podcast, and we'll see how far that takes us. As I mentioned, if shows go longer, they go longer. If they stay shorter, they stay shorter. There was a long stretch of time where we wanted this show to be right around the 1 hour mark, but we're at a point in the season now where it's really going to fluctuate pretty heavily based on what we got going on the show, what took place the previous night, things that we're keeping an eye on of that sort. At Dan Besbris on Twitter, if you'd like to give me a follow. I did mention on the podcast that we were looking for more ratings and reviews of the show. We've been hanging out around that 180 mark, and then a couple of you did take the time to rate and review the show. It's much appreciated. Every one of them counts. Every time our rating gets a little bit denser with 5-star reviews, it's easier for people to find us on iTunes. We'll come up in auto searches when they search for fantasy or Fantasy NBA or Today or NBA Today. All these little things where, especially if it's a more loose term, like if they're just searching for NBA, we're going to be way down the list behind a lot of more established podcasts, non-NBA shows. But every time we get a new subscriber and every time we get a new rating and review, we just click up the chart a little bit. And you guys know this podcast is my baby. I know that a lot of you protect this podcast because it helps you. But anyone that you can tell about it, any positive reviews you can throw our way on whatever service you use to listen to the show, it means the world to me. My greatest goal is to turn this podcast into the kind of thing that's sort of self-sufficient. And it's become partly that, thanks to the partnership with our good buddies over at Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company, at HI Kona Coffee on Twitter. HawaiianIsles.com is the website, and Hawaiian Isles at Amazon.com as well. They are our partners in crime. They're a presenting sponsor of all of our shows here at hoop-ball.com. I strongly recommend you go and get some of their coffee, and there's a couple ways to do that. As I just mentioned, you can search for Hawaiian Isles at Amazon.com. You can go to their website to check out all their goodies there. HawaiianIsles.com is the website. Or, and this arguably is I don't want to say the easiest way, but it's certainly the cheapest way And that's wins second place in our DFS contest. Second place winner takes home not only the near $20 in prize money on a $3 entry. So yes, you can sextuple your money. I believe the prize is $18.75 right now for the top 20 teams. But also, if you're in second place, you get a coffee goodie bag from the aforementioned Hawaiian Isle. So big thank you to Glenn and the team over at Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company, the best, and part of what has turned this podcast into a self-sufficient machine, and we're going to continue to grow this bad boy. So certainly your help in doing that is always much appreciated. Let's start the podcast by looking back at the short Tuesday card and really the very few things that we were keeping an eye on from that Tuesday. Number one, the New York Knicks. DeAndre Jordan sat this one out with a sprained ankle, and it opened the door for let's be honest here, a moan-inducing game from Mitchell Robinson, who had 17 points, 14 rebounds, 3 steals, and 6 blocks on 6 out of 9 shooting and 5 out of 6 at the free throw line. This is a first-rounder kind of line. He committed only 3 fouls in his 32 and a half minutes. He was brilliant. He had to deal with Nick Vucevic during this ball game. Guys, we're seeing the emergence of a fantasy superstar before our eyes. You guys know I don't buy into the hype all that often, but this is amazing. This is amazing. And I only pray that New York doesn't obliterate the opportunity they have before them. This is Hassan Whiteside before the max contract level stuff. Remember when Hassan was triple-doubling with blocks? Mitchell Robinson has that potential right now. He's learning how to block shots without fouling before our very eyes. This has taken place over the span of like a month and a half of basketball. He's like a blocking savant. It's incredible. I honestly have no idea where he's going to get drafted next year, but I'm probably going to overdraft him. And you know I don't buy into the hype that often, but this is one of those times. Meantime, by the way, Henry Ellenson played 36 minutes off the bench in this ballgame. I don't know why Noah Vonleh and Lance Thomas started the game. It made 0 sense when it happened, and it made 0 sense as the game moved along. But Henry Ellenson had 13 and 9 with 5 assists, 2 steals, and 3 3-pointers. I'd need to see this 2 or 3 more times before it even becomes remotely fantasy relevant. Although, I should probably pick my words a little bit more carefully. Not that it becomes remotely fantasy relevant so much as I would need to see it a few more times before it becomes remotely relevant to me. So if you want to take a chance on it, be my guest. But we've seen what happens at that power forward spot in New York. There has been some Luke Cornett days. There have been Mario Hezonja days. He was out with an injury in this one. Alonzo Trier got hot off the bench. He had 18, which slowed down Damian Dotson. He was on a little bit of a heater. Emmanuel Mudiay has actually been scoring quite well since coming back from his injury, and he's been rendering Dennis Smith Jr. a more difficult player to own. So it's all a rough time out there, but Mitchell Robinson, he is not part of the rough times. There's just no one else, you know? Nobody else on this team is worth running out there on a night-to-night basis. Boston blown out in Toronto. The guy we were watching was Marc Gasol because he started their previous game but got shifted back to the bench in this one. Did get more minutes than Serge Ibaka. He played 23 minutes, had 5 and 5 with 8 assists, a block, and a 3-pointer. Missed 2 free throws, or it could have potentially been actually a decent ball game for him, a fairly well-rounded one, if unspectacular. And I think, you know, despite the fact that he was coming off the bench, the fact that he's now seeing more minutes than Ibaka is a good sign for our fortunes going forward. I don't know that he ever gets up into that 30 range, but if we can push him into the 25 to 27 spot, then I think you're looking at a top 50, top 60, maybe at worst type of center, especially as the rebounds, the assists, they're going to be using him to orchestrate a lot of offense when Lowry's not on the floor. Just someone to see things out of the high post, and he's a very good passer. So don't panic. And if anything, I think you still have a buy low window here. Otherwise, on this Toronto team, I don't know what you're truly looking for. I mean, Danny Green had some foul issues. If you're panicking on that front, you haven't been paying attention all year. He's been fine. Jeremy Lin played 25 minutes in the blowout. The minutes were all over the map. Pascal Siakam had another fine ball game. I mean, the guy that really the only thing we were paying attention to was Marc Gasol and what he's doing to Serge Ibaka, which this is a bad one for Serge. I may be adjusting my expectations down a little bit if indeed he's not going to play even a second at power forward, and it's looking like that might be the case. And then finally, there really wasn't anything we were watching in that last ball game. Oklahoma City and Denver, just, battle of top teams in the Western Conference. Denver, an opportunity to basically solidify their position in the Northwest Division. And Oklahoma City trying to sort of challenge their way back into it. And fantasy perspective, on the Denver side, we're always sort of keeping track of guys like Will Barton, who did look better in this ball game. Paul Millsap had been playing better lately. Gary Harris, we were wondering if he might be able to start pushing his way through. Jokic, Murray, and Millsap have been the trustworthy guys on Denver lately. And then my hope was still that Will Barton could sort of push his way to the forefront of the rest of that pack. I mean, this is a guy that was a top 50 dude even when his teammates were healthy in previous years. And so I still hold out hope on that front. I think guys like Monty Morris are fading here as the Nuggets get healthy. Malik Beasley's going to fade. He and Gary Harris are basically splitting time right now. Isaiah Thomas is taking minutes away in the guard positions as well. You have to be pretty judicious with the guys you're running out there, and it looks like, and who knows, there's going to be ups and downs for a lot of these non-Jokic Nuggets, but it looks like Jokic, Murray, Millsap, and Barton are probably the guys going forward. And that's it. That's all you got going on from the short Tuesday card. It was an easy one. Nothing to think about. We're going to talk to Mike Apotria in a moment. I wanted to give a few season-long thoughts on the massive Wednesday card before we turn our attention to it and basically just get into for a couple of minutes here what we're watching for. And there's a lot. Houston and Charlotte. Kenneth Faried, what do his minutes look like in Houston as Capella slowly gets his legs back underneath him? Can he sustain 25 minutes a game? Cody Zeller, he's been great lately, which of course over his career means he's due for probably a little bit of a pullback. Nick Batum, starting at shooting guard, has really helped him on the aggressiveness front in particular. Jeremy Lamb's move to the bench did hurt him in one ball game, but he's actually looked really good in other ones, picking on second units and rolling up steals like they're going out of style. The Miami Heat, Derek Jones Jr., I believe, is expected to play in this ball game. He's a guy that I'm watching, along with Goran Dragic. There's a few things to monitor now with Miami, as opposed to just everything, which was our MO with the Heat for a while. Washington, Thomas Bryant off the bench. He had a massive game their last time out. Do they dare let him play 20 to 22 minutes a game? If so, he's a great center to own. Minnesota, who's healthy enough to go? Is it Tyus Jones streaming time? I bet it is. I don't think Jeff Teague plays in this game, but I guess he could surprise us. Really neat streamer if you have the space on your roster for Tyus Jones. And even if you only get him for a couple of games, it would be helpful. The Atlanta Hawks, is Taurean Prince back? Because if so, we might see finally a healthy set of wings on this team and then find out what that means for Kent Bazemore. Is he actually going to maintain any of those extra minutes he's picked up when Herter was hurt and then when Prince had to miss time? That's definitely something worth monitoring. Portland, we're mostly watching Enes Kanter with a subtle note to Jake Layman. Kanter's looked good. I know he wasn't as great in his last ball game, but he's been really efficient. I think he'll turn it up here against Boston. They're going to need a little bit of his scoring off the bench. Celtics are going to be, I would think, a little bit pissed coming home off a nasty loss to Toronto. Chicago Bulls. Do I put Robin Lopez? I got ahead of myself in this ball game. Do I put Robin Lopez on the watch list? He seems like a pretty easy play right now. I admit I was a little bit slow on the uptake there. Not that slow. A little bit slow. A couple of games, and I thought, maybe this really is a thing. And the last 3, he's been on my fantasy team, and he's just rolling. He's making a lot of his buckets because, they're all coming from 6 feet and in. Not a bad foul shooter for a big man. He actually had a 3-pointer in their last ball game. He doesn't rebound much, which is, I guess, the only knock. He and his brother are both box-out artists at this point in their career. Jim Boylan loves him. So why shouldn't we? Memphis. This is all kinds of screwy. Now Ivan Rabb has a heel issue, so they are down to very few. That's the medical term. Very few remaining big men on that roster. Jonas Valanciunas and Joakim Noah, that's about it. So you can actually play Noah, and I think Rabb is missing this ball game, although I don't know that it's necessarily set in stone yet. It sure seems like it. And that means Joakim Noah is looking at maybe almost 30 minutes? Is that possible? Could he get that high? Maybe not. I guess it depends on where they play him, right? If he and Jonas Valanciunas just split the center minutes, then you're probably looking at about 25 for JV and 23 for Noah, which lately somehow has actually been enough for him to get up into the 8, 9, 10 rebound range. But he's a bad foul shooter. He's shooting actually over his head from the field, a lot of hustle stats. And I don't know. I've said it before. He's a tough guy for me to believe in his older age. He's a good passing big man, always has been. So if you need a couple of assists, I suppose there's a universe where that could be relevant. But man, I don't know how he could play fewer than 23 minutes in this game with everybody else besides JV out. They won't play them together. That's crazy, right? Just crazy enough to work, I guess. Oh man, I don't know that I can recommend a long-term grab on this one. But if you want to take a chance on it while everybody else is hurt, screw it. Go for it. Detroit at San Antonio. Wayne Ellington, specialist stuff. I think he's settling in there, and we have a pretty good idea of what to expect. Derek White's minutes slowly being ramped back up again for the Spurs. They're happy to be home, I'm sure. Most likely a wildly undervalued team right now, San Antonio, coming off this rough stretch. But that only comes into play if you are a betting man. They're favored by only 4.5 points against a suddenly hot Pistons team, thanks to the first-round level play from Andre Drummond. Indiana lost Domantas Sabonis at the end of the last ball game. He's expected to miss a couple of games, which means now Kyle O'Quinn will continue to see some time as a backup. Miles Turner, luckily healthy just in time for he and Sabonis to kind of switch spaces. Dallas is the more interesting note on this one. Subtle note here to Wesley Matthews as well. He looks like he's fitting in. To me, I don't like him as much because, I don't know, we've just seen what he can do, and in his older age, it's less enticing, but he does fit in with sort of the Reggie Bullocks and the Wayne Ellingtons where, I mean, you could totally remake your team with those three guys. On a night-to-night basis, those three guys could average 9 3-pointers, which is crazy. That also means that there are going to be evenings where they all hit 5. You pick up all 3 for a day, and maybe that's enough. Anyway, Dallas. We saw Dwight Powell inserted into the starting lineup. I would venture to guess that he'll remain there against Miles Turner. Maybe they go to Salah Mejri when they play teams with a particularly gigantic opposing center, but Indiana's not one of those. So do we see another near 30-minute game from Dwight Powell? He saw 30 minutes in their last one. Can he get up near that mark again here? Playing alongside Tim Hardaway Jr. and more so Luka Doncic was really helpful for him. Just guys that can space the floor, can see the floor a little bit. Luka in particular able to pass him the ball out of a pick and roll in transition. Just easy buckets. And that gets the motor going for a guy like Powell. So keeping a close watch on that one as well. For the Clippers, I think we've now settled in. And I think it's safe to call them Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, Danilo Gallinari, and Patrick Beverley. I don't think they're on the watch list anymore. The Clippers, I mean. Utah, nothing there. Fantasy stuff, all pretty relevant. Milwaukee, Niko Mirotic, sort of seeing how he's fitting in. He looks good so far. And he's not ramped up to full minutes as of yet. Sacramento, not much. I'll start with the Lakers in that last ball game, who obviously desperately need to win a ball game here these days. It sounds like Anthony Davis is going to play in this one, so he'll see his 20 minutes, which means who knows what the hell is going to happen with Jahlil Okafor and Cheick Diallo. Diallo's been the more interesting player lately, but there's no guarantee that he sees more than 14 to 15 minutes in this one, and that's tough to use when only 28 minutes are left over, when Anthony Davis is not at center. So what do you get? 16 out of Diallo and 12 for Okafor? That's not fun. Julius Randle, Drew Holiday, Elfrid Payton, who's seen a big usage spike with AD on the floor, less. And then you got all these other guys that are basically locked into weird time battles. Kenrich Williams, Stanley Johnson, Darius Miller, who's been out, Frank Jackson, Tim Frazier. I'm not interested in any of them. They have to prove it to me. It's got to be a few games in a row at this point, because it seems like right now you get one decent one clunky one, or two clunky ones, one decent one. It's not making sense for these guys. And then with the Lakers, I think Reggie Bullock is really the only question mark at this point. You sort of know what you got with Ingram, points league guy who's been playing better of late. LeBron, obviously. Kuzma has been a standard league guy. JaVale McGee, who doesn't look like he ever fully recovered from pneumonia, but at least he's getting his 20 minutes. He's a top 100 dude. And then Bullock, who's been better in LA than he was in Detroit. And I don't know if it's because he's now playing with LeBron, so the looks are better, or if it's because they're letting him play more defense. It's unclear exactly what it is that's helping. Maybe it's the style of basketball. But whatever it is, he's been able to put a few defensive stats into his mix, and the question becomes, is this sustainable? Over the entire season, in 31 minutes a game, this is with Detroit and LA, he averaged 0.6 steals and 0.2 blocks. With the Lakers, he's at a steal and half a block per ball game. That's a pretty big difference. Slightly more than half a block per game, I think. I believe he's sitting on 5 steals in 5 games and 4 blocks in 5 games. Although I could be mistaken on that. He's also sitting on, over his last 4 games, 3 three-pointers a night. And he's doing it on a very reasonable 46 to 47% shooting, because everything is wide open, and he mixes in a layup or 2. So he might now be moving towards the top of my what of these three-point shooters situation, where mostly centers popping up at this time of the year for whatever reason, but you've also got these 3 three-point specialists, 4 if you include Allen Crabbe, which I'm not, Bullock, Matthews, Ellington. For a while I had Ellington above Bullock and then Matthews. Now I think I might be flip-flopping Reggie and Wayne up at the top. I just like the fact that his field goal percent is not going to crush you like the other 2 guys probably will. And the fact that he's also mixing in some blocks here and there and a couple of assists. This is sort of an unexpected bonus. Is he going to be a standard league guy the rest of the way? Tough to say. He's number 70 since coming to the Lakers, but that's only a 4-game sample size. I think he has a very real opportunity to be a top 100 guy. And if you're on a team that needs three-pointers desperately without ruining your field goal percent, he makes some sense. All right. That's yesterday. That's today. That's the full season stuff. Let's move along to DFS. It's DFS time with some full season mixed in. As promised, we're going to talk to Mike Apotria about tonight's contest, but also about some of the pickups we've been discussing. I'd love to get his opinion on these guys. Mike, a wonderful fantasy mind, not just the daily stuff. He's also terrific at the season-long stuff, and he's awesome on our weekly lineup show as well, where he's able to use some of that DFS knowledge to talk about matchups on a game-to-game basis. He is a busy man. We are keeping him hard at work. He blurbs in the mornings. He writes those DFS articles, and today he is with us on the podcast. What's happening, Mike?
Dan, these intros, you're too kind. You're too sweet. I guess I'm great. I'm mystical. I love the compliments. My girlfriend might disagree with you a little bit. She just walked out and heard that, and she just gave a nice little chuckle at the bottom of the stairs. So I know I'm going to get made fun of for that one later. Good,
as it should be. What my goal here is, and I don't know if people have caught on with this, is all alliterative. Every time that I refer to you or to Floppy Divots, our guy Chef, by his Twitter handle, I want it to be an alliteration. So for you, it's going to be magical, mythical, mystical, marvelous, the whole thing. Anything that goes with Mike. That's how it's happening. With Floppy Divots, it's going to be fabulous. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be ferocious. And this is my new move. This is how I entertain myself when I generally talk to myself for many hours during the day. But what's going on, man? How you been?
I've been good over here, man. It's about 12 o'clock. We're grinding. They got a lot of games to look at tonight. 11 games. Past few weeks in these contests, I've been just coming up 1 or 2 plays short. But I do have to say, I love doing these because I'm seeing week by week these articles, the guys that we're talking about, they're getting used in the contest, and the people are beating me with my own plays, and that's one of my favorite things. And we got a lot to talk about last week, this week, but I'm just happy to be here with you, man, talking some b-ball.
Yeah, talking some hoops. So, peek behind the curtain here at Fantasy NBA today. I recorded both beginning and end of the podcast before this segment. So there was actually a time gap. And during that time gap, we got a little bit of breaking news coming out. And so I want to touch on that before we even get into the DFS stuff. I also mentioned, Mike, and you didn't get to hear this part yet, I mentioned during the opening portions of the show that I wanted to talk to you a little about season-long stuff, too, because there have been so many crazy pickups and drops. Forget, it's not all guys getting better. Some of this is guys getting worse, and so I thought we could cover a little bit of that as well. But breaking news, Mike, Rob Covington assigned to the Iowa Wolves, the G League affiliate for Minnesota. This is colossal news. This means he's playing. They're gonna let him practice. This is like, I reckon that this is not him necessarily getting into the games immediately, but when right around the beginning of the All-Star break, and when we learned that he wasn't going to be playing right afterwards, I said probably around the turn of the month, and I might have been going a little bit too early, but I think we're looking at it within the next week or two, right?
It's definitely going to be within 2 weeks, I think. Guys, once they start getting a few minutes in the G League, they just try to get their stamina and their cardio back up, and that's going to be the biggest concern for Covington. It's just getting back to that game-ready shape. And he's a guy that he prides himself on his body. He's a very active player. So if he's out there, I expect him to be feeling a lot better. I don't think this is something that we necessarily have to worry about lingering too much. The knee has bothered him throughout the season, but I don't think the Wolves would be going out there to test him. They would just give him as much time as they need, and they are desperate for him.
Yeah.
And fantasy owners as well. This guy was a top 40 player easily when healthy. So I'm needless to say, I'm excited. I know you are too.
Yeah, I am so excited. I can hardly contain myself, and I just hope this turns out to be as good a news as it seems on paper here. That's my hope. I don't know that it's my expectation. He's missed so much time. This is sort of, I don't want to say out of the blue a little bit, but it does seem like this is a massive step in the right direction at the very least. I wanted to ask you about a couple of the big men that have been surfacing here over the last little bit, because I think a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we talked about how it seemed like guys like Jahlil Okafor were going to step into a big role, and I have to admit, after holding out on him for a really long time, and I took a bunch of flack for it on Twitter as, hey, I don't think this guy can keep it up the rest of the year. I thought, all right, well, seems like they want to play him now with Anthony Davis basically being half shut down. Then I bought in, and right as soon as I said, all right, I guess it's time for Jahlil Okafor, then they decided to scale him back to 13 minutes a game and play Cheick Diallo for 17. We've also seen the surfacing of guys like Dwight Powell with a big game in the starting lineup his last time out. We've seen Kenneth Faried maintain a starter's job, even with Clint Capella and James Harden back in the lineup. I mean, this is... There's big men that are surfacing and big men that are going back underwater on what seems to be like an every 4-day rotation. Who of these guys to you, Mike, stands out as the ones that can last the longest? And we can feel free to throw guys like Robin Lopez and Cody Zeller and whoever else into the mix too. You can cast your net as wide as you like, is what I'm saying.
So you're definitely gonna need a wide net. So the Okafor thing's a little disappointing because I definitely recommended him to a few people as well. It's kind of just like a dumpster fire. They want to give everybody in that front court a little bit of time. It seems they're interested in seeing what Cheick Diallo can do in about 18 to 20 minutes, and that's really what's going to be punishing Okafor more than even Davis playing his 20 minutes. Is the fact that they're even willing to give Diallo the time, and he deserves it, rightfully so. He's a young, good player on their team, so. I'm a little hesitant now on the Okafor stance, but as far as Faried, I think the playing time is still going to be there for him. It might not be 26 minutes, and he might not start every game. That might have just been like a matchup-dependent thing to go against Dedmon and Collins, but this guy's taking three-pointers, and he's making them. Over his past 3 games, he's taken 7 3-pointers and made 4 of them. So if he's going to add that to his arsenal, and that's something that he really never displayed when he was playing in Denver and all these other places. So I'm a little interested in Faried still, especially because, there is that upside of just him playing 25 minutes without the 3-pointers. He's like a walking double-double. And you brought up Robin Lopez, and he's a guy that I just don't see the reason not to own and not to play at this point. If they're going to continue to roll him out for 30 minutes a night, he's clearly their best rebounder. Market has been out-rebounding him. But that's also due to Lopez's boxing out. Both Lopez brothers are excellent at boxing out defenders.
Box out
they
artists.
help out their teams a lot.
I like to call them the Lopez brothers box out artists.
Yes, they're both like master of the art. People like to knock Brooks' rebounding numbers, but you don't understand. They do that for a reason. It gets Giannis the rebound, and he just kind of takes that thing up the court in 3 strides.
Exactly. And that's the thing, like, people didn't realize that that's what was happening with the Lakers last year as well, that he was taking flack for going for 17 points and 0 rebounds, but the team was consistently better on the glass when he was on the floor. This was a huge deal for Milwaukee. They were among the bottom 3 teams in rebounding rate last year, and they've elevated themselves to, I don't know their mark this season, but I believe they're middle of the pack now, and that's largely Brook Lopez, just clearing out space for, like you said, Giannis to get it and go. This is a way to keep the big bruisers away from Giannis on the glass. And Middleton, Chris Middleton, for all of his faults this year, and there have been many, he's been actually pretty good on the glass. His rebounding numbers have been solid. I think he's at 6 a game this season, so that's also not bad, and I believe that's a career high for him too, isn't it? I think so.
I would imagine, yeah. When I hear that number, that definitely stands out. And this is kind of something we've seen the Bucks almost take out of the Thunder's page book or playbook. It's something that they've done with Russell Westbrook for about 2-3 years now. Steven Adams is an excellent rebounder, but he's even better at boxing out. And he's, padded Russell Westbrook's rebounding numbers for a reason. It's not necessarily just so he can get the triple-double. It's to jumpstart that offense and transition. When Westbrook is the first person to grab the ball, he's already looking up the court before he even grabs the rebound because he knows Adams has a solid box out. He doesn't even need to focus on the ball as he's rebounding. He's looking eyes up court for an open man or just to take it himself 90 miles an hour to the rim, 90 feet. So this is something that I think you're going to start to see a lot of these big men, especially the ones that can shoot threes and, shy away from the basket here and there. They're going to start utilizing this more with their athletic players that can run the floor.
All right, let's talk some DFS stuff. We'll transition into today's contest. Of course, it's the same criteria as previous weeks. 125 slots, $3 entry, $375 in cash prizes, and of course, first place takes a Hoop Ball T-shirt home. Second place, a goodie bag from our buddies over at Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. Fantastic stuff. You got yours in this morning, Mike? Are you wired and ready to go?
Come on, dude. Is that a serious question right now?
Are
we asking me if I have coffee in my cup? Yes.
Yeah.
And it's only one brand. We've been over this a long time now.
Fair
I told you, I'm not going back. There's not a chance. The girlfriend's even hooked on it now, too, so I'm stuck.
Yeah, you guys are
stuck.
Likes it. That's once both of you are in on it, now you're really doomed. So hopefully we can get Mike a winning cup. If not, then you're just going to have to put some money in the piggy bank. That's how it works. You gotta buy that stuff. HawaiianIsles.com is the website. At HI Kona Coffee if you want to give them a call on Twitter. And you can also find them on Amazon. Amazon.com, just search for Hawaiian Isles. It'll pop right up there. And then you can get that bad boy sent to your doorstep. Prime 2-day shipping. I think we all basically have Prime memberships at this point, right? Doesn't the world, everyone in the world has a Prime membership?
At some point, you didn't even realize you might have been at the DMV. You could have been at the doctor's office. You signed and checked a box that you're paying for Prime.
Yeah.
You have it. You don't notice, but you definitely have it at some point.
So where do we start with DFS then, Mike? How do we break this thing down? Do we look for the free squares first?
We can start with that if you want. I mean, tonight it's not, I would say, as we might get some news later on. Like I said, it's still pretty early, so the free squares might come out later. The other night we had, Tyus Jones was our pop-up free square right before lock. Once we found out that he was starting and he was near minimum salary on DK, I think he was 3,500. You get those sometimes locks. As of right now, I don't really have any one single player that I would consider a free square. I have a lot of guys I like, and I'm going to be mixing and matching some of these guys, and hopefully one of these combinations work. And it's kind of the same approach I take. I lower my player pool. I get down to about 20, 25 guys I'm really genuinely interested that I like in all their spots. And then I go and build from there. There's a few games I'm not interested in whatsoever, a few games that I'm going to be overly interested, and then there's a couple good one-off spots here and there. But overall, I think we're going to have a fun one. And, I just want to take a second and give like a shout-out last week to Ryder Prince. He actually took down first and second.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Contest.
Unbelievable.
He got both of them. So he got himself a T-shirt and a coffee pack, and that's kind of been my goal since we started. And He did it, and he did it on his own. I got to give him all the credit for actually making this lineup. But it's like I said, I'm very transparent with the guys I like. And if you were listening to our podcast last week or you read the article I wrote up, every single guy in his lineup was in that article or we talked about. I mentioned every single one of these guys. I liked all these guys. I kind of pivoted off Horford a little bit, and he went bananas.
Yeah, that was the big one. Most of the winning lineups last week had Al Horford in them.
Yeah, he went off. Those Al Horford games happen once in a while, and that was definitely a big one for him. And these are guys that we talked about. They were great priced. Eric Gordon was a great price. He played. I told a lot of people I was higher on Curry than LeBron and Giannis. At the end of the day, though, I backed off of Curry. I really still liked him, but I had some value open up in other spots, and I was just confident with Sexton and LeVert's price, and that's what sunk me. Everything else was great for me, but Sexton and LeVert sunk a lot of my lineups. Those guys underperformed badly.
Yeah, likewise. So as you look at today's slate, I noticed quickly here at a glance the Vegas totals. Two of the 11 games today have totals under 220. Do you eliminate those games immediately, or do you still look at some of the guys in them and see if maybe there's some price value there?
I still look at those games because I know we're still going to be dealing with injuries. And one of those games I'm assuming you talk about is probably the Memphis-Chicago game. I believe that's like a 216.5 over under right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely have some value in there that we could look at on both sides of the ball. So we're still waiting on some news with Chris Dunn and Otto Porter. I think they're both currently questionable again. If those guys are rolled out, we can go right back to the studs with, Lauri Markkanen got a price jack, but his usage and his playing it's been off the charts lately. He's completely warranting the price. And then you got Levine again, who's going to have another high usage against a Memphis team. Yeah, they might not be the fastest paced team, but they're not the same Memphis defense that is in the numbers if you check out it for the season. And then on the other side, Ivan Rabb's doubtful. So we got a Joakim Noah spot again. Jonas Valanciunas, he took a price bump. I'm kind of leaning more Noah over Valanciunas tonight just because I think that we might see some of those twin tower lineups. And if that's the case with Ivan Rabb out, it might buy Noah 3 or 4 more minutes. And he's still a little underpriced for me at 4,500 against a weak Bulls front court. So that game I still think is in play. The Dallas Pacers game, I'm a little less inclined to play. There's probably maybe 1 or 2 guys I'd be looking at in that game. And if I was to look at anybody, it would probably be Miles Turner on the Pacers side and then Doncic on the Dallas side. But I think I could spend my money elsewhere mostly.
Yeah, I think the name that would pop up to me on the Dallas side is Dwight Powell, just because he got bumped into the starting lineup and suddenly his role increased dramatically. Do we wait and see on this one? My guess would be that he starts again because the Pacers don't field what you'd call a gigantic starting center. The ones where they might throw a Salamedri in to try to combat a big dude. I think, if you're expecting him to go for 24 points again, you're probably vastly overestimating what he can do. But it did seem like his job got a lot easier playing alongside Luka Doncic. How do you weigh the fact that, Powell getting maybe closer to 30 minutes at a decent price, although Miles Turner, a very good defender? How does that stuff balance for you?
So here's where I run into this, and this it comes into a lot with ownership and pivots and other guys I do like. So I just mentioned Joakim Noah at 4,800. A lot of people are going to be on Noah, but I think I'm not too sure. I'm going to have to check it out later, but I think Powell might actually garner a higher ownership just because of his past game. He went absolutely bananas and won a lot of people money if they played him, but it's a different matchup. It's a different slate, and we have to look at it like that. So they're not playing the Clippers. The Clippers are one of the worst teams against bigs. We know that. We target them all the time. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. We're probably going to go to them again. And, the Pacers actually hold their own on defense. They slow teams down. They play great defense. And it's a different type of, overall matchup. We might not see as much Powell. Powell just might be playing 26 to 28 minutes, which would be great. But if it's most of the times against Miles Turner instead of Montrezl Harrell, Zubac, or JaMychal Green, he's not going to be getting nearly as many DK points per minute. So he's still an option. I'm not going to say don't play him. I think he's a good value. 4,300 is a fair price. It's just because of ownership and the pivots I could take, I think I'm going to go other places.
Gotcha. Okay, so where are those other places? You mentioned the Clippers as a team that gives up a bunch to big men. Does that mean that you're looking at a guy like Rudy Gobert as one of your more expensive plays on the card tonight?
Yeah, so you can't ignore the 3 high-priced guys that we have to deal with all the time when they're playing, and it's Harden, Giannis, and LeBron. They're all in play. They're all in great spots. They're all, within a few hundred of each other. I think, literally 11,000, 11,100, and 11,200. You're probably not going to be able to get two of these guys in on DraftKings unless you really dumpster dive, and I don't think that's the right way to go tonight. So if you had to pick one, I'd probably be leaning towards either Giannis, LeBron. Giannis, if you think this game plays 4 quarters, which I do. He's a beast. If he gets 38 minutes, we know what we can do at that time. And LeBron is just LeBron in this matchup. Again, we have to expect different results than last time. Those are the two guys really priced up. But I guess if you're looking at guys, I'd say between the 9K to 7.5K range, I got a decent list I can run through real fast without wasting too much time.
No, it's not a waste, man. This is not time wasted. This is time well spent. So what do you got?
I would say I'm looking at guys like Andre Drummond, Bradley Beal, and Russell and Markkanen all up there in that upper 8 range. Those guys I think are all in play. Russell's a little riskier. He's just a volatile tournament guy where we know he can win you one and we know he can lose you one. The other guys I feel just pretty safe with. I'd probably go Markkanen and Drummond at the top of that list, and then a little bit below them, Gobert, Julius Randle, Zach LaVine, and Drew Holiday. I all think are in fantastic spots. I love Drew's price. I really like Drew. I really like Randle. Gobert, if this game stays close, which I think it has a decent chance to, because this Clippers team is not tanking. We already heard that they want to compete. And if we get 4 quarters out of Gobert, he should end up with at least 15, 16 rebounds. And if you there's a little gap in between the next kind of tier I go to, but right in the middle of the gap is Draymond Green. I have a lot of interest in Draymond in this matchup at 5,900. I think he can do some damage. And I think Boogie Cousins actually got ruled out in the midst of us talking. So now I like him even more. That's a cheap price for him. We know he's going to have pretty much as many rebounds as he can handle. Another guy that pops up is going to be Kevin Looney. He's going to get some extra center minutes as well. So those two guys are going to just kind of boosted their way up my radar a little bit more. And for the 5.5K or less guys, I'm looking at Derrick Rose, Elfrid Payton, Dwayne Wade, Joakim Noah, who I mentioned, Joe Harris, Tyus Jones if Jeff Teague is ruled out again. Kennard has been playing great off the bench. He's shooting hot lately, so if you want to keep riding the streak, it's not one of the games we're trying to overly target, but we're looking for value in certain spots, and he's definitely an option. Mo Harkless has been seeing increased minutes with Evan Turner out, and they might need him more in this matchup against Boston, who has several wing players. If he sees anywhere between 26 to 30 minutes, we know he can get steals. We know he's not going to score a ton, but he kind of gets those peripheral stats that might slowly edge our way over to about 22 or 24 points, hopefully. And then the last guy I think I'm looking at for dirt cheap would probably be somebody like JaMychal Green at 3,500. They're going to need somebody. They're going to have to just be throwing bodies at Gobert tonight between Zubac, Harrell, and Green. None of these guys I'd really feel comfortable playing against them, but if you're telling me that he might see 3 or 4 extra minutes because one of the other guys is getting absolutely decimated, that's good. That's good for him because he's been playing about steady anywhere between 16 to 20 minutes since he's been on this Clippers team. He's pretty much their I wouldn't say their backup big because that's Harrell, but they chop up the minutes between him and Zubac pretty fairly. And yes, Zubac makes more sense size-wise, but he can get dunked on a lot in the first quarter, and that can change things very quickly. And JaMychal Green, we saw him on Memphis. He can put up some decent counting stats in limited minutes. 28 DraftKings points, 27 DraftKings points, 17, and then 26 are the amount of points he put up over the last 4 games. And at 3,500, if you're telling me that his floor is looking like it's about 18 to 20, and he has the upside to get to 30, possibly even more if he gets a couple extra minutes, I can buy in on that a little bit. I'm not going to go overboard on it. Like I said, it's more of a tournament play. I don't know if he'd be in, I'd probably put him maybe 1 out of every 10 lineups or so, maybe even more sparingly, to be honest. But he's on my radar.
Man, this looks like a lineup that's going to trip me up in so many freaking places, Mike. How do you make the call between some of those guys that you were talking about? Because, you obviously can't use all of the mid-tier guys or you'll run out of cash. You got to pick 1 or 2 of the cheap ones. I don't need you to give your entire card away on this thing, but how do you end up whittling it down at that point? How do you eliminate guys at that portion of the handicap? Well,
first of all, you said giving your card away, which just kind of triggered something like with Tim Hardaway in my head. So now I'm going to have to try to tie that in somehow for future references. I don't know how, but I'm going to work on that maybe for an article or something. But
that's right. We're going to call you Mike Cardaway. Mike
I got plenty of advice, I guess, and plenty of ways that you can go about it. I'm looking at, like I said, I do multiple lineups generally, and I'm going to go multiple ways, and you're going to I can kind of give you a good idea of the guys I'm probably looking to plug in immediately. I'm most likely playing either Giannis or LeBron, so I'll just get that out of the way. But that's an 11K guy that's going to be on my team no matter what. Very high in Joakim Noah, 4,800. So that can just almost be one of my probably higher owned center plays. And then I like to do a lot of 2 center lineups, so I might throw in some Gobert with him or some other options like that. But Tyus Jones is hard to ignore if we get Teague out. So there could be one of your cheap plays. So if we hear Teague's out and you start with, let's say, Tyus Jones and Joakim Noah, that's a 4,500 guy and a 4,800 guy I feel pretty comfortable with. Definitely more comfortable, I'd say, with Jones, given the matchup. It's a fantastic matchup for point guards. And then just look at the guys that you think are underpriced. So the way I'm structuring it is I'm probably playing Julius Randle a lot, Elfrid Payton a lot, and Drew Holiday a lot as well. So if I'm playing Julius Randle and one of those other guards, it's probably going to be Elfrid Payton because it's going to be tough to get a 78 and a 76 in there. So if I'm not playing Julius Randle, I'll probably play a little bit more Drew Holiday, and then I'll use some of that extra money somewhere else. On a couple of the other guys, I'm maybe try to get one of those guys from the Bulls if we hear Dunn's out. But, we have options. Like Joe Harris is another guy. He's underpriced. There's a few guys floating around that 40-something $100 range, and then a couple of guys I mentioned in the mid-fives, like Peyton and Draymond, where you can kind of fill out those other spots. And, once you start fiddling with it and you kind of get all these guys out there and you start looking at it, you'll find yourself with a comfortable lineup faster than that.
Well, it's just a matter of time until we figure out what Dan screws up this evening, and so I'll be looking for you around place 45 at the end of this competition, and I'm guessing you'll be out in front of me. I don't know what it is, Mike. My brain is better tuned for full season plotting as opposed to trying to pick which of these guys is going to have the hot night this evening. The wonderful, the magical, the mystical, the marvelous, the magnificent at Mike Apotria on Twitter. Mike, good luck in DFS this evening. Make us all proud, and then you can wave down to me at the end of the night.
I hope so, Dan. Let's see. Thanks for having me, man.
That was our good friend Mike Apotria breaking down tonight's contest. Some thoughts on the season-long stuff as well. He really is. He's really good at both. I worry that sometimes we pigeonhole him here as the DFS guy, but he's just a great hoopball pro. You should definitely follow him at Mike Apotria, Mike Apotria on Twitter. I am at Dan Besbris. And please, as I mentioned earlier in the show, if you have a moment to rate and review the pod, I will be ever so grateful. Tomorrow is Thursday's show, which means it's a halfer. You heard that earlier this week. Tuesdays and Thursdays are going to be half-length shows the rest of the way as we conserve our energy and focus hard on just the key fantasy stuff. Nothing more, nothing less. We're going to break it down. It's going to be a little bit like a box score breakdown, but we're also going to take a strategic approach to it. Pickups, drops, you know the deal, but also streaming thoughts. I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. Sort of end-of-season potential, silly season pickups. This is going to be our goal, and that's why we're going to sort of pare it down from long-winded bloviating, which I do sometimes. And I'm talking to myself. You can get lost in thought a little bit. So that's a halfer. On Thursday, we'll finish things up with Brew. Friday will be a recorded show with Aaron Brewski. He and I are going to talk about all the biggest notes, stories, pickups, drops, whatever, of the week gone by. That's the rest of the week on Fantasy NBA Today, a Hoopball and Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company presentation. Have a lovely Wednesday, everyone. Good luck at the contest. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.